Most successful people in the world spend their time and their money to make more time and more money. See, they never spend their money blindly. Every single dollar that they spend has a calculated risk associated with a return on investment. Think about some common areas of investments for people: crypto, stocks, rental properties. Do you think the people that are most successful in those areas threw tens of thousands of dollars down without doing any research previously? Probably not. So why would you treat your flight training any differently? Hello everyone, my name is Colin Boone. I'm a professional flight instructor and Gulfstream pilot based in Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm here to tell you about the mistakes that I made during my flight training to save you time and money on your flight training. When I went through flight training, airplanes were very expensive. I was spending entire paychecks throwing them at my flight school, and I was going to fly for a few hours. And now those prices have only gone up. So before you go and blow 30 grand on a private pilot license, make sure you subscribe to the channel to learn the ins and outs of flight training so that you don't make the same mistakes that I did. There are plenty of areas of flight training that you could use advice in to save some time and money, but I'm going to be focusing on the maneuvers themselves, the things that you're going to be doing in the airplane, common mistakes that student pilots make, and things that take them hours to fix. Keep in mind that hours doesn't sound like a long time, but when you're spending upwards of $300 per hour for an airplane and an instructor, that adds up really quickly. So if you can eliminate those things, or at least be aware of them before you hop in the real airplane for the first time, you are going to be miles ahead and you're going to save some time and money on your training. You might be saying to yourself, well, either way, I need those hours in my logbook to become a commercial pilot and to become an ATP and an airline pilot. So why should I focus on saving the time and money now? Well, and the answer lies in this. If you can have the same level of confidence and spend less time paying an instructor and paying for the airplane in the flight training environment, then you have afforded yourself the ability to go time build and split costs with other pilots or friends and family after your training is complete. So for example, let's say you're flying a very nice and new Cessna 172 with G1000 in it, and it costs $220 per hour. I have seen that around Phoenix. It's a very realistic number. And let's say your instructor costs $80 per hour. You're now spending $300 per hour to go fly this airplane around and do your flight training. Let's throw the flight instructor away. We don't need him anymore. That's $80 an hour out the window. Now you have to cover the $220 an hour for the airplane. I can take a buddy or another time builder pilot with me who is allowed to split up to 50% of that cost for the airplane with me per hour. So now I'm only paying $110 per hour instead of $300. Better yet, you and your buddy bring your girlfriends on board or whoever else you want to bring on board. You fill up all 4 seats. Now you're only responsible to pay 25% of the cost of the airplane because that's your equal percentage. You could be flying for $55 per hour instead of $300. Like learning any new skill, you are going to make mistakes. So let's look at some common student pilot mistakes that I see with real students in real airplanes before you go and spend hundreds of dollars per hour on your real life flight training. Now, one of the big money savers on your flight training is to not fly an airplane like this. This is a beautiful, brand new G1000 172. Fly an old 6-pack with a decent GPS and save 20, 30, 40, 50 bucks an hour just because the airplane isn't as well equipped. But you're not going to have to utilize all of this stuff during your private. That's big tip number 1. But because we do have all this nice stuff, I'm going to use the autopilot to show you how the airplane flies itself. You should pay attention to how autopilots fly airplanes from 172s with this nice GFC 700 autopilot all the way up to like a 737 with a huge 3-axis autopilot that flies buttery smooth. On one of your first flight lessons, you're going to talk about the principles of flight with your flight instructor. Talk about the 4 forces on an airplane, horizontal, vertical components of lift, how to influence the pitch of the airplane using the power, pitch for airspeed, power for altitude, all that fun stuff. And applying that stuff in the airplane without any prior experience can be a very difficult task. So I'm going to show you how the autopilot does it and how it does it super delicately to maintain buttery smooth controls all the time. Now, if you're flying with me in a real airplane, we're going to spend all of our time looking outside, the vast majority of our time looking outside for your private pilot license. But because we have measurable quantities and values on the G1000 screen, we're going to use those today. And let's start with a turn. If I'm staring at the G1000 screen, I am straight and level, about 2,400 RPM over there, 98 knots, 5,000 feet. I'm going to do a 180-degree turn to the right, to a heading of east. And I want you to pay attention to what the autopilot does to fly this airplane. About 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees of pitch. This first line is 2.5, then we got 5, 7.5, 10, etc. Watch what the airplane does. I'm going to scroll on my hardware, that heading bug. You can see it there on the HSI. Rolling it over to 090, and look at what the airplane's doing with its flight director there. The airplane has slightly increase the pitch. It's very minuscule, but look at the flight director going up to 2.5 degrees already. And look at the speed. The speed is bleeding off. Very small amounts of speed are being bled off, but it's enough to notice it. And the airplane is changing that pitch to increase the pitch as it loses that speed. Put the turn finish on up. So it's varying its pitch a little bit. It's maintaining the altitude very nicely. Lost about 2 knots of speed. And as we level out, it decreases that pitch, puts it back down, and it captures the altitude, which is absolutely correct. And over the next few seconds, we all get back up to 98 knots. So those were very, very small adjustments that you saw the airplane making to maintain level flight during that turn. But the 2 errors that student pilots do is that they don't increase the pitch when they start a turn, and that can be detrimental, especially in steeper banks of turn. And I also didn't increase the power, which led to a loss of airspeed. If I were to bank to 40, 45 degrees for my private pilot level steep turns, that would have resulted in a much higher loss of speed. Therefore, holding the altitude would have been a lot harder, and then it's easy to get behind the airplane. And I see student pilots do that all the time. So let's dive into this a little bit further. The airplane's still at 2,300, 2,400 RPM, and we're going to do the same thing, 180 degree turn. This time, I'm going to add like 50 RPM when I start this turn. Okay, we got it about 180 degrees there, and I'm just going to add a small blip of power, just a little bit. This is going to give me a little bit more thrust, put a little more downforce over the tail, and help me lift the nose up without me pulling the elevator back, which is going to cause less drag. As a result of that small bump of power, I actually gained a little bit of airspeed. I didn't lose any airspeed. My speed has stayed the same. Which leads me to the next mistake. When students add the power to start the turn, they forget to take it out when they end the turn. The airplane starts rolling out. I'm going to decrease the power back to the starting RPM, little jolty there, right about 2,400. My speed's going to settle and stay the same the entire time. In the grand scheme of things, losing a knot or two or gaining a knot or two is not a big deal, but you can see the effects of these very thin margins being applied right here using the autopilot. Now, if I take the autopilot off and I try to do the same thing, there it is right there. I'm going to get rid of the flight director as well so we don't have to cheat. I'm going to show you what that looks like with a little bit more bank. So I'm not going to change the RPM at all, and I'm just going to bank up to about 45 degrees right there on my attitude indicator. Here we go. In order to maintain the altitude, I must increase the pitch slightly, which I am doing, about 2.5 there. Increasing the bank. There's about 30. We're going over there. Going towards our 45. There's my 45. I am between the 2.5 and 5 degrees of pitch, excuse me. And look at that speed bleeding off. I'm also gaining a little bit of altitude. I'm just going to keep the turn going to show you what happens over time. About 50 feet high. Not a big deal. But over time, that speed bleeds off, and it's more and more and more. And you notice I haven't touched the RPM at all. As I lose some airspeed, less airflow is going through that propeller, which leads to the RPM falling on its own. So I have actually lost a little bit of power, and I've lost some airspeed. But over time, especially in airplanes that are underpowered, this is going to lead to you getting behind the airplane and vacating the limitations prescribed by the ACS for each maneuver. You can see as I got down exactly to 5,000 feet, I'm still a little bit slow. Do this in a Cessna 150 or a more underpowered 172, you're going to feel the effects of this a lot more. Now I'm back in straight and level flight. It's about 5,000 feet. Haven't touched the power at all. It just lost 40 RPM through that maneuver all on its own. And I'm about, 5 knots slow, 6 knots slow. There we go. As I put the nose back down to regain that speed and put the altitude back down to where it should be, I'm going to gain that RPM back without me doing anything. So this is gaining a very basic understanding of the tendencies of an airplane, the fundamentals of flying that make you a more smooth pilot on the controls. So we looked at what happened when we don't increase the power, but what happens if I don't increase the pitch? If I don't increase the pitch, what happens is when we go into this turn, I'll only start at 20 degrees. If I don't increase the pitch, I'm just holding the same pressure I did when I started the turn. The nose is going down. I need to increase the back pressure to maintain the altitude. If I go to 45 degrees of bank, this effect happens even more. And the airplane starts spiraling. I'm still in control of the airplane, so it's not out of control. But look how quickly this develops. This is what we want to avoid. And I see people start going towards this, and by the time they realize that the airplane is descending far too rapidly and the pitch isn't where it needs to be, it's already too late and they've already busted the maneuver. I've been flying in flight simulators for 12 years, in real airplanes for 8 years now, and it's very easy for me to notice these things happening and to correct them. I notice if I don't have enough power in the turn because the nose starts to drop and it's a little hard for me to pull back on the yoke. I notice if I don't have enough pitch in the turn because I start losing altitude, and I can see the sight picture outside of my window and on the attitude indicator that I'm starting to get a little bit low. I can hear and I can see and I can feel that the speed's getting a little fast or a little slow. So the main mistakes here, when students start turns, they don't add any power, they don't increase the pitch, and when they roll out of the turn, they forget to decrease the pitch and take out the power that was added at the start. So if you have a flight simulator, try doing level turns at home at all different types of bank and try to keep the altitude and the speed the same the entire time. If you can master this on a simulator at home, it'll take you a little bit of practice in the real airplane to adjust to the feeling and the weight of the real airplane versus the lightness of the plastic hardware on your desk that you have on your flight simulator. But you will understand the concepts and you will be better than those who have started without prior experience. I want to bring your attention to another mistake I see much every student pilot I've ever had make for a good period of time at the start of their flight training. Look over there. That's Chandler Airport. That's one of the airports I train pretty heavily out of with students. And I'm probably 6, maybe 5 miles away from the airport right now. And students will wait until they're about this distance from the airport to start getting their weather information, to call the tower, to plan their descent and their traffic pattern altitude and their traffic pattern entry. They will wait until the last possible minute in order to think about those tasks and accomplish them. So when they get into the airport environment and within the bounds of that airspace for that airport, they are very, very overloaded with tasks to do. Their sensors are going crazy and they get very behind the airplane. As we depart Chandler Airport over there, I'll bring your attention to over here, all the way almost to that mountain over there. This is all our practice area that we use in real life. If I'm coming from the practice area, and very commonly over this farming field area, that's about 15 miles from Chandler Airport, and then right at this mountain right here, that's 8 or 9 miles from Chandler Airport there. When I'm out there and I decide I'm going to go back to the airport, I am immediately getting the weather. I am getting the tower frequency plugged in. I am executing on all of those preliminary tasks that I need to accomplish before I enter the airspace of that airport. I know what runway I'll probably be using. I know what tower frequency I'm going to be using. I know what traffic pattern entry I'm probably going to get. And when I talk to tower, I'm not going to be surprised by anything. I already kind of have a plan in my head, which allows me to get ahead of the airplane. And when I enter that airport's airspace, I am able to only focus on flying the airplane. So all of my attention gets to go to one thing and one thing only. I don't have to divide it amongst all of those other things when I am in one of the most critical phases of flight. One thing I'll commonly do to students when they're new and I'm trying to teach them this lesson is I'll have them 8, 9, 10, maybe 12 miles away from the airport. And I'll say, let's go home. Let's call it a day. And they will immediately beeline it to the airport and try to fumble all of those tasks, if they remember, in a 2, 3, or 4 mile span before they call the tower, and they're very, very overloaded. So Chandler Airport is over there, about 9 miles away at this point in time. And if my instructor were to tell me, hey, let's go home, I'd say, okay, well, I got to get the weather first. All right, well, I know the airport's over there. I'm just going to hold out here for a little bit. All right, I'm going to start tuning in my radio frequencies, and I can't actually see it. Oh, there it is. I'm going to start tuning up my radios. I'm going to get the ATIS. I'm going to get the tower frequency in there. Let's look at an airport diagram real quick. What runway am I most likely to use right now? Now, I'm going to handle all of that while doing a very low effort circle out here. You can see my hands are up here. I'm barely doing anything. And if you have a nice airplane, you can even throw the autopilot on. But I'm not going to use that right now. So create that space. Create time. Give yourself more control. Make a good PIC decision. That's the whole lesson here. If you're feeling rushed, you're feeling overwhelmed, one, speak out about it, communicate it with your crew member or your flight instructor next to you. And if you have passengers on board, don't put them in a potentially dangerous situation because you're trying to rush in a short, finite amount of distance or time to get to your objective, your goal, or your destination airport. If you have to circle and you're on a flight plan, you tell ATC, look, I got to circle on behind the airplane, or maybe you can help me out, give me a vector. Create that space, create that time. Don't put yourself in a bad situation where you're cramming. And you can see I've done what, like 270 degrees on a turn here. I'm still very low effort holding the altitude, and I'm just fine. So you can absolutely do this. And the last thing I want to cover today is using the ailerons in a stall recovery. You hear this from your instructors a lot. Don't use the ailerons in the stall recovery. They're not effective. You're going to cause the wing to stall more. You're going to spin. And that's all very true. That's what I'm about to show you. But you never actually get to see it because you're just told of how to avoid that. So let's see what the consequences are of doing that incorrectly. So here we are about 4,000 feet, and I'm going to initiate a power on stall. When a wing dips and my nose goes to one side, I'm going to recover using the ailerons, and the airplane is going to spin. Here comes the power. All the torque I possibly can. Make it a little uncoordinated. Wait for it to come. Really, really steep. There it goes. That's the aileron correction that students inherently want to do. And we are spinning. Not good. Okay? Now I'll try to get out of this. It's pretty difficult now as I've gotten very far behind the airplane. We're probably going to rip the wings off. No, we haven't. Okay, well, that's good. This airplane definitely needs to be inspected immediately. But let's talk about that. So what just happened? I got very, very slow. I have left turning tendencies on a fully throttled propeller at 2,700 RPM. And the airplane, as a result of being really slow, having those left turning tendencies, it started to dip a wing to the left. And when a wing dips in a stalled condition, and the airplane doesn't go straight back down with the wings level, if one wing dips more than the other, the wing that dips more is more stalled than the one that raises because there's less smooth airflow on this wing because we rolled to the left than there is on the right wing. Because of that, the right wing lifts and the left one stalls more. So both wings are stalled, but this one goes a little bit more aggressively and it goes first. Now I've just taken the autopilot off and I'm going to show you what the ailerons do when I roll the airplane. So if I do a right hand bank, I'm going to put my yoke this way now. See, barely, I'm not being too aggressive, but if I do it a little more aggressively, you can see how that right aileron got raised and then the left one actually went down. Let's do it one more time. This one goes up, left one goes down. Okay, so what's happening aerodynamically? Aerodynamically, I am bringing that right aileron up, which interrupts smooth airflow over that wing, kind of like a speed brake. And it causes that wing to drop because I am reducing the lift on that wing. The left one does the exact opposite. It lowers that aileron and extends the camber, the curvature of the top of the wing, which promotes more smooth airflow and creates more lift. So I'm cutting lift on the right side and I'm increasing lift on the left side, which is why the airplane's able to bank. Let's tie all of this back into the stall spin that we just encountered. We stalled the airplane. That's very clear. We saw it happen. And when the left wing dipped, that was a clear sign to me that the left wing stalled more severely than the right wing. Both wings were stalled, but the left one stalled more. That's why that one dipped and the right one raised, because the right one, while it was still stalled, it had more lift. So remember, that left wing is stalled. And when I try to use right aileron here, I'm banking now to the right-hand side, I am lowering that left aileron and trying to create more lift over that surface. What happens when I try to create more lift when the airplane is stalled? Let me show you. If I try to create more lift when the airplane is stalled, such as, well, we're pretty close to stall now. A little lower. Okay, there's a stall warning. If I try to create more lift by increasing my angle of attack, what happens? The airplane stalls, and it stalls more aggressively. Let's do it again. Right now, why can't the airplane climb? Why can't I bring the nose up? It's because I am stalled. There's not enough airflow for me to have this work. My full back input on the yoke is not working because there's not enough airflow. As a result, oh, well, there we go. So if I'm trying to increase the angle of attack of a control surface that's stalled, the airplane is only going to stall more. Because of that, when I try to use that right aileron input and I tried to increase the angle of attack in the lift of the left wing, when it was already stalled, it just stalled more, causing that wing to dip even more aggressively and the right wing to just roll on over. therefore creating the spin. So it's all very funny because if you've read any of your textbooks that your instructor has had you get, or if you've had more than 2 ground lessons with your instructor, you will have talked about this, but you never actually get to see it in action because you don't do spins during your private pilot training. So that's the result of trying to recover from a wing dip and a stall with the ailerons. And that was very aggressive. But that just goes to show you, you have to use that rudder instead. And when I use that rudder instead, let's just take a look at exactly what that looks like. Doing this very quickly and aggressively. Save a little time. Put full power in there. Same scenario as when we did that spin, trying to keep the wings level. Here it comes. Let the nose come down using the rudder. I now have enough airspeed to make those ailerons effective. You can see that working there. And then I pull the nose back up. Very, very simple. I had to try to use the ailerons, and I used them full. I would have had that spin. Now, to show you all of the student pilot mistakes that I see happen regularly, that would take me months of doing the series, maybe even a year of doing the series. So for today, that's just a few of the core ones that I see when student pilots are starting out. If you would like to see more of these kinds of videos, please let me know in the comments below, drop a like, and subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to interact with me and those in my community, make sure to join my free Discord. Link is in the description below. Lastly, if you like the videos and you want to save time and money on your flight training, be sure to check out flightsimuniversity.com, where I've developed an entire course to teach you the fundamentals of flying airplanes using flight simulators. In the private pilot course, I teach you everything that a real private pilot student would have to do. All of the maneuvers on their check ride, radio work, cross countries, anything you could possibly think that a real private pilot student has to do, I teach you in the course, and it all costs less than an hour in a real Cessna 172. Links are all in the description. Thank you so much for watching, you guys. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.